Hey everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Natalia Trizak with Enghouse Interactive, and I'm delighted to be facilitating today's webinar. Thank you for joining us to learn more about digital transformation in the contact center. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. We welcome any questions you may have. Please use the GoToWebinar chat panel on the right side of your screen to submit questions at any time throughout the webinar. Questions will be addressed at the end and will be followed up if we run out of time. The webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive a copy on the slide deck and the recording of this webinar via email over the next few days. Now, for a brief introduction of our presenter today, we've been very fortunate to have John Cray deliver a few presentations for us now. John is Enghouse Interactive's VP of Product Management with responsibility for defining the global strategy and release plans for Enghouse contact center products. John has a 25-year history delivering product center and CRM solutions and has published articles and papers on topics ranging from the future of contact centers and customer service to optimizing operating system security. He is currently based in Chicago and holds a bachelor's degree in physics from Notre Dame and a master's degree in computer science from the University of Illinois. So let me hand it over to you, John.
Thanks, Natalia. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate your valuable time. We've got quite a bit to go through, so we're gonna be a bit aggressive with the slides here, trying to move us through the content. As Natalia said, though, if you think of questions along the way, it's such a big topic, digital transformation. I almost feel like Jeff Bezos or Steve Jobs here, trying to tackle a topic this broad, but I think we're gonna try to focus on a specific area. If you look at the topic more broadly, the standard place to go for definitions of this kind of topic is Wikipedia. And Wikipedia calls it the change associated with the application of digital technology in all aspects of society. We're not going to cover all aspects of human society today. We are going to focus in specifically on what organizations do to use digital transformation to improve their experience with their customers. That's what Enghouse does. We work on helping companies to improve customer experience through contact center technologies and related technologies. I think key to this, though, in the Wikipedia definition is that last little line there, which indicates that organizations typically get to digital transformation in kind of an evolutionary process. They might start with some basic competence in some of the newer digital technologies. Then they start to use them, and as they use them, then they transform their businesses. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means to more fully utilize digital technologies in the context of the customer experience, and then what you would do to transform your customer-facing departments, customer-facing business functions over time with the use of some of these technologies. So that's what we're going to really focus on today. It's funny, when I've been thinking about the webinar over the last couple of days, and just yesterday, just as a little story, my niece was on a website trying to order a part. So she was actually on the website for Shark, the folks who make the vacuums, the portable vacuums, and she was trying to order a little add-on little part for the vacuum. And she's in her 30s, just to put this into context, she's in her 30s, and I am older than that. And so she was on the website and the shopping cart wasn't working. So she was literally in the place where you order the part and put it in the shopping cart, and for some reason the website wasn't putting it into the shopping cart properly. And she was like, what do? I can't order it. And I said, well, why don't you try the Contact Us page? And we brought that up, and there was a phone number, and I said, why don't we call the phone number and see if they can handle it? And we called the phone number, and sure enough, they were able to take the order over the phone. But it struck me how amazing it is that, and I think this is somewhat generational, that we can get paralyzed if we aren't able to kind of follow through on a digital path now. Like if we actually have to take a step back to a traditional method of communication, or product ordering in this case, we can actually suffer a bit of paralysis. So I think we'll talk a bit about how generational this is as we go, but I think it's a really interesting place that we find ourselves in right now in terms of organizations trying to accommodate digital. We actually have a few market surveys that we're quoting from in this, and one of the surveys is available from a company called Altimeter, which is a subsidiary of Profit. They did a survey of 528 global companies across the world and asked them this question: what are the key drivers of digital transformation within your organization? And I think the answers bear out our focus area for today. 55% said it has to do with the customer. Their customer is evolving in what they expect from the organization. 53, so again, over half said it also has to do with the fact that they're trying to address new markets. Maybe it's a new way of selling, maybe it's a new market geographically, maybe it's a new particular area of focus for the business. But by transforming themselves digitally, they're able to approach and hopefully make successful entry into a new market. And then, of course, there's other reasons as well. There's the competition, there's regulations, both from the government and in terms of compliance as a business. So there's all kinds of things that might drive you to seek out digital change. But I think hopefully this bears out the topic that we've chosen for today, which is really the evolution of the customer experience. I wanted to give you just a little bit of an example of where digital is transforming the way we interact with a business. And an example that we all are very, very familiar with is healthcare. So what if you're a patient and you have an appointment with your doctor? Well, we're all very used to the fact that we now get appointment reminders, and typically we get them texted to us on our cell phones, or we get a quick automated call with a message, that pre-recorded message that plays the appointment time, or we get an email. But we get some kind of a reminder now to tell us, and in the event we want to change the appointment, maybe we can click a link in that message and we can go to a website or an app, and in that app or website we can make a change to that appointment if we want to. And then maybe if we have trouble, at that point we can go into queue and speak to someone live, directly from that web interaction, or we can chat with someone or whatever it might be. And then we get ready for our appointment, and maybe we don't have to wait anymore to go to the doctor's office to fill out the form. We might get a little message that says, hey, we need the form filled out now. Can you do it electronically on your mobile so that you don't have to worry about it when you get to the doctor's office? And then, of course, you visit with the doctor, but then after that doctor visit, you've got those post-visit results, again, conveyed to you digitally. So what we're seeing here is, and again, there's a lot of the use of the phrase customer journey, the actual transition of a customer through many forms of communication in order to solve a business problem. But if you break this down and you look at the parts of this interaction, we've got a part that is the part for what we might call self-service, where the system itself is telling us that we have an appointment, allowing us to reschedule, letting us fill out the form, and giving us our results. All of that happens through an automated system without any real live human interaction. And then we've got the piece that allows us to do the communication live with someone. It's all part of the same journey. It's all part of resolving the same issue, but it's broken down into an automated part and a live part. And notice a lot of the automated part is textual. It's digital. It's conveying information through digital channels like SMS, text, like mobile applications, like web forms, like email, and so on. So, if we break this down, it's all part of the same framework of communication that all makes up a customer journey. If we look at what a couple of surveys are telling us about the importance of the customer experience, we're looking at the priorities for contact center improvement from a survey done by an organization called Contact Babel. We'll give you the link for this survey a little bit later in the presentation so you guys can download this yourself. But this is what they ranked as the top priorities for the customer-facing organization, the contact center, to improve. And customer satisfaction was all the way at the top. Interestingly, cost was fourth. And commonly in the past, we've looked at cost being the primary driver for improving the contact center. But more and more, we're seeing the priorities of the contact center shift to a focus on the customer. And then in a survey done by Dimension Data just this year, the customer experience was viewed as an extremely important differentiator for the business and having extremely high value across a number of different areas. Over 91% says if you increase your customer experience, it's going to increase your loyalty. It's going to reduce the churn, the loss of customers. Over 85% said it increases your employee engagement. Those are two very connected things in the Dimension Data Survey, is connecting the experience of the customer with the experience of your own employees who interact with those customers. And in this day and age where we worry about things like employee churn, you know, when in the case of agents in a contact center, there's a very high level of attrition. If we can engage those employees in the customer's issues and make it personal for both the customer and the employee, we're going to have a lower attrition rate. We're going to keep those employees. And then a very high percentage also indicated that customer experience has a direct correlation with increased revenue and reduced cost. So it's got an extreme amount of value. If we can focus on improving the customer experience, and in this webinar we're going to talk about doing that through digital innovation, then we're having a tremendous impact on the business. Frost and Sullivan this year said that by 2020, customer experience will actually be the most important differentiator for the brand of any organization, overtaking even the products they sell and the price point they sell them at. So again, we're now looking at customer experience as being the key reason you obtain and keep customers. So what drives great customer experience? Well, that same Contact Babel survey, looking at the contact center factors most valued by their customers, said first contact resolution was the most important thing. More and more, again, we're seeing things like short queue times, the amount of time somebody has to wait on hold, becoming less important than being the experience itself that the customer has. If the customer has an experience where they have to keep calling back for the same issue, or the contact center has to tell them, we'll call you back tomorrow or next week, then the customer's experience, the qualitative aspect of that experience is going to go down, and customers are not going to be as happy. And so they value first contact resolution and, of course, how agents handle that contact very, very highly. And then Dimension Data said, you know, when they asked their customers, what are the top trends, market or technology trends, affecting that experience with the customer? The number one trend was the importance of the entire organization, the entire company, appreciating and accepting the importance of customer experience. If you think about it, you need funding from executives in order to pull this off. So executive management has to appreciate and value this level of improved customer experience. But we also need basically every group in the company, from those who deliver service to the customers, to those who create products, to those who handle finance and collection, everyone that the customer is involved with, that might have a touch point with, must appreciate and value customer experience. And then as we walk down the list of other key trends, data analytics, omni-channel strategies, and new technology models, all of which overlap with digital innovation and this move from traditional channels of communication to more digitally focused channels. Those are all impacted by this change. And we're going to talk about each of those as we move along here. In the Dimension Data Survey, they asked how many of the customers surveyed, and they surveyed over 1,000 customers globally. They asked, how many of you handle each of the primary communication channels when communicating with your customers? And these were the results. So although we like to say, phone is going down in value or usage, it's really not going down in terms of its importance to an individual business. It's still the case that over 96% of businesses, and even with a little bit of growth signified in the gray area there, a little bit of growth over the next year, going up to about 98% of businesses will still need to support voice as a primary communication channel. What I think is interesting is how important email is. Most businesses prioritize email fairly highly. It's a nice compact digital form of communication that allows you to convey a lot of valuable information in a very packaged way. You can put images, attachments, documents, and so on in email and send them out to customers, and the customers get a lot of value from that very compact form of digital communication. But as we look down the list, we see the importance of lots of digital media here. Websites, social media, SMS coming on strong. Look at the growth of SMS there in the middle of the chart over the course of the next year, going from about 59% usage to about 77% usage in the course of just 1 year. That's a huge amount of growth. And look at the next one down, actually the next two down, the use of mobile applications and mobile instant messaging or chat. The growth there is enormous. Planned growth is enormous over the next year or so. And so we're looking at businesses really, really strongly focusing on what it takes to make it easy for their customers to communicate textually and digitally using their device of choice, which more often than not today is the mobile device. We talked earlier about my niece and her issues with shopping carts, but I wanted to show you a little bit of a chart. This also came out of the Dimension Data Survey, showing us how use of channels, the popularity of channels changes across different age groups. And a couple of interesting points here. Number one, take a look at the very top interaction channel, social media, for the under 25 age group. But as we actually go up in age, social media drops significantly. It takes another little bump over 70, I think primarily due to sort of family connections for folks who want to stay in touch with their families. But I think we're really seeing a fairly dramatic difference in the use of the social media channels that really varies dramatically by age. Another one that I think we need to pay attention to is voice. If we take a look at voice for, say, under 35 years old, it's ranked 4th or 5th. It pales in comparison to the digital channels. But as soon as we go over 35 years old, the importance of voice again skyrockets. So it's a dramatic difference in the way different age groups treat communications. And then a couple other interesting points. We talked about email before. Email has a lot of importance. Again, over 25, we're seeing quite a prioritization of email as a very efficient communication channel. And then this mobile application where, anything, sort of in under 54 here, it is ranked in the top 3 because mobile usage is skyrocketing. So we are definitely seeing a shift, but I just wanted to point out that we can't leave voice behind. It's got to be a part of whatever digital transformation we go through as a business that prioritizes the experience of its customers. So what about agents? So if we talk about digital channels, then the next logical question is, okay, I've got a group of agents, and my agents are, logging into a system when they get in the morning, and how are they spending their time? And in the same Dimension Data Survey, they asked how many of the agents remain dedicated to just voice. And amazingly, about almost 2/3, about 62.5%, remain dedicated to just voice. So this is a very specific question asked by the survey where they said, are you handling anything other than voice? Even email would categorize, as a digital channel, and only 37.5% are doing something other than voice. They're handling some other form of digital channel. So then the next logical question would be, well, if 37.5% are handling digital in some way, what percentage are actually doing both voice and digital at the same time or in the same day? And the answer there is about 21%. So of the 37.5%, about a little less than, say, 2/3 of them are blended. They're actually dividing their time between voice and digital channels. But what's actually happening in the market? And I think this is where we can take a step back and we can compare the survey from this year to the exact same survey last year. So if we look back at the 2016 Dimension Data Survey and ask the same 3 questions, we can see the difference. So even though it seems like we have a lot of agents remaining dedicated to voice, that actually is down from last year. Last year we were at about 68.3%. This year 62.5%. So the voice dedicated agent percentage is declining, and what's happening to those agents is they're moving into digital. So we see that the 37.5% is up from 31.7% last year, significantly up, 6%, which is a big climb. That's almost, about a 17% increase from year over year from last year. And then the blending is also up. Not as much, only about a percentage, but it still is climbing. So even though we're still seeing this division of labor across different channels, and part of the survey, they go into the why, and part of that is due to the fact that, not every agent is necessarily good at both speaking on the phone and constructing a clear, well-formed digital message, whether that's an email or even a chat. So we're seeing a lower percentage blended, but it is definitely moving dramatically into digital channels. Another question that the Dimension Data Survey asked was, what specifically will reshape your customer experience capability in the next 5 years? And I went ahead and included all the answers that came out of this kind of in order of preference. And here they are. And I have a little percentage next to each that came out of the survey. Basically the question was, what are the top 3? So the percentage that you see to the right there it includes that category in the customer's top 3 for reshaping their CX capability. But customer analytics was at the top, and we're gonna dive into what we mean by customer analytics in just a second. But then as we go down the list, we see that digital and omni-channel aspect to customer service. Connecting that journey together, like we saw with that healthcare example, making sure that whatever experience you give the customer is personal to them, meaning we identify who they are, and if they're a premier customer, we treat them as a premier customer. We have context from their history. We know who they are, and we have the ability to look back in that history and know what we should be doing now based on, we're in an informed agent who really knows where that customer has come from and what they're looking for. And then the movement to digital, proactive automation, like the appointment reminder that we saw in the healthcare application. And then down the list, but climbing, is our more advanced pieces of customer experience logic and intelligence, like AI and bots, like social media, and the clever use of cloud solutions, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So let's start right at the top of the list with customer analytics. What do we mean by customer analytics? What kinds of metrics are we talking about here? And how do we go about obtaining those metrics? Let's talk about that. So first of all, when we talk about customer analytics, one of the key questions we ask is, what is the quality of the customer's experience? And according to this Dimension Data Survey, these are the top factors impacting the satisfaction of the customers who are contacting you about an issue. And the number one, and we saw this earlier with the Contact Babel survey, the number one was first contact resolution. The number one with Dimension Data is ease of resolution. It's really the same thing. It's the level of effort the customer is having to put in to get their issue resolved. And then choice of communication channels or ease of contact. Here again, is the customer able to get to you from their mobile device in a way that is easy for them and quick for them to get service on? Then we see first contact resolution, and then we get to things specific to the contact center like agent knowledge and, again, queue or wait time. Having been doing contact centers for a lot of years now, we used to really prioritize wait time. The number one metric we always talked about with contact centers was queue time or hold time or wait time, because customers hate waiting on hold. But that has steadily fallen down the list over time with this emphasis on customer experience. It's still on the list. It's still a key factor, and we still, of course, want to minimize that hold time for our customers. But over time, it's become more important that when the customer gets someone or gets a digital channel to help them, that channel actually does help them. And then we take a look at the measurement of quality. And again, the survey asked, where do you measure quality today? Do you do it on your phone calls, and do you do it on digital? And what we see from the results here is more customers are doing it on phone than they are on digital. But the growth of digital is so vast now that's coming on strong. Just a few years back, the actual metric of quality management or quality monitoring of digital interactions was extremely low. Now people are viewing those interactions, passing them through intelligent filters to analyze them, and assigning them to managers to analyze them and coach and improve their agents to provide a better experience digitally. That is now dramatically increasing over the last few years. And then we start to go down a little bit in percentage, but it's important that the whole customer experience is taken into account. Not just that initial phone call or that initial email or chat, but what if we promise a follow-up? And do we then analyze the quality of the entire interaction, the entire journey with that customer, including the callback or follow-up? And then what about the quality of what the back office delivers? Because more and more through unified communication, we're talking about engaging back office workers as part of that overall customer experience. One of the classic examples there is the loan, right? You call up your bank and you want a loan, and that loan requires the collaboration effort of a number of people to pull off, including possibly a loan approval officer in the back office. So you've got to engage that person, and more businesses are doing that kind of thing in real time so that they can optimize first contact resolution, close more loans, and of course deliver a better, more improved customer experience. So business process, including back office and automated systems coming out of the back office, is also a critical piece. But all of these metrics combined give you a true measure of the quality of the overall experience with the customer. If we take a look at how you measure quality, we had talked about the fact that we wanted to get to these customer experience analytics. What are the techniques? And here we're tapping into the survey from the Contact Babel group, who started looking at how many businesses are actually doing something. About 89% of the businesses they surveyed are actually doing call recording and then analyzing those calls either through an automated system or through a supervisor or manager listening and evaluating to determine the quality of the interaction. Surveys is a key approach to measuring quality. Whether you ask a set of questions or a single question, how likely are you, for example, to recommend us to someone else, whether you ask that question or many, a lot of times the automated survey is used, and doing that in a periodic way in order to assess the overall feeling of the customer about your business and its services is done 70% of the time, and about 50% of the time, a little over half, right after the call or after the email or after the chat, you get a survey to analyze, whether you were happy with that particular interaction. So surveys is a key piece for the majority of businesses in order to analyze customer satisfaction and experience. And then we start to go down the list into somewhat less prevalent mechanisms, like the ability to take those recorded calls and pass them to a speech analytics engine in order to determine, was the customer upset? Those kinds of systems can be used in a very clever way to identify recorded calls that we then want to listen to and pay more attention to in order to coach our agents. So we can use speech analytics not just to give us holistic or summed up metrics across all our calls for a particular group of agents or particular function, but also to identify problematic calls so that we can use those to coach our people to do better. We also can use speech analytics, interestingly, to identify the best calls, the calls where the customer was the happiest, the calls where the customer said at the end through a survey, for example, yes, the agent solved my problem on the first try, and we can use those calls to coach other agents as examples of what a good call can be. And then similarly, there's text analytics for the digital channels. Now we're falling dramatically down in frequency right now because some of these technologies are, again, very new and very up and coming. The other challenge with analytics technologies is they typically require tuning. So you have to deploy the applications, start using them, and then tune them over time to have higher performance in the quality of their analytics. But once you do that, you can get a lot of value, even if you're just using it as a supplementary technology to some of the other technologies you use for evaluation. And then significantly down the list is coaching your agents in real time using a speech analytics tool. Again, it's up and coming, it's there, but it's down the list in terms of frequency of use today. Back to the survey. What will reshape your customer experience capability in the next 5 years? We talked about the quality of interactions and the analytics that we're trying to gather about our customers, but let's talk about the next 3, which really have a huge overlap with digital forms of communication and digital transformation. How do we connect customer journeys together across channels so that an agent is best equipped to understand the context or history of a customer's experience? And so a manager can actually look at that journey and say, wow, it took us 7 touch points in order to solve this customer's problem. And then how do we personalize the experience with the customer? And how do we do that, those 2 things, across all the new channels of communication that we're focused on here? These are very important things for businesses that are saying they want to go through digital transformation and they want to improve and reshape their customer experience capabilities. Very important things. How do we go about doing them? Well, let's kind of go from the inside out. Let's take a look at the agent experience first. So first of all, here's what an agent experience might look like if someone is really invested in the agent being capable of looking at history and doing full omni-channel. Here we have a user interface. This is an application that Enghouse has called Touchpoint. This application basically allows the agent to optimize the experience, the touch point, with a particular customer. Now, what are we seeing here? We're seeing a number of things, a fairly busy screen. But the nice thing is it is all combined on a single screen. And many businesses are focused on simplifying the desktop. And although this looks busy, it's a single window that combines a lot of information and power and control and function into one view. For example, on the left-hand side here, we see all the interactions that this agent has going on across different customers at the same time. This is a full blended omni-channel agent. This is someone who can navigate between SMS texts, emails, chats or instant messages, and calls seamlessly and move across. And we don't see any here at the moment, but also social media interactions, outbound interactions, and so on. We can simultaneously navigate across them with a single click, just by clicking on one of those tabs and move back and forth. What's the advantage of that? Well, take a look. First, we are simultaneously handling two interactions from the same customer, Rachel Bishop. So we have a chat going on with Rachel, and we also have an email that we're composing to Rachel. The advantage of that is if the chat doesn't cut it, and I need to convey a lot more information or throw in attachments or whatever it might be, and the system that she's using for chat doesn't support attachments, let's say, I can just easily send her an email. I've got her contact information in my database. It's all tied together. These days, I collect contact information across all channels in a common database. So I have her email address. I have her web ID. I have her phone numbers. I have her cell phone number, and so on and so on. So I can seamlessly move across media channels and convey the information in the most efficient and productive way for Rachel. And that's what customers want. They want it all to be handled all at once. I can seamlessly move in that top little area there across media channels. I can introduce a new form of interaction to Rachel. I can call her back right now directly from the chat because I have her number. I can do all that seamlessly and solve her issue. And in this case, I'm chatting with her. She has an upcoming medical appointment. She doesn't understand one of the questions on the forms, and I said, "Are you available for me to call you?" And Rachel says, "Sure." And so I, the agent, can now give her a call and finish the interaction on the first contact. This tab here has all the related interactions from Rachel for the past. So I can look back. She's got 3 that were sent out over, say, the last week or the last month. So by clicking there, I can see the context. And over here on the right, I can actually see what she may have filled out on a web form or information coming from her medical record or her financial record or whatever it might be. And so all of that is combined into a single experience for an agent. Think about the power of an agent and the empowerment of that agent with this level of tools and capabilities. This means that agent can really, really provide great service. Might the agent not be able to answer every single question for Rachel? Of course. But also with this capability is instant messaging and calling and conferencing with the back office. I can simultaneously also look at the presence of people in the back office, include them in the conversation, like that loan officer, for example, for closing that loan, and so on and so on. It's all combined into one experience for the agent. And by empowering the agent at that level, I can optimize the experience for the customer. I can send Rachel to a survey right after this is over. I can look at survey results from previous surveys she may have taken. It's all combined together in this very rich framework. So if we take a look at specifically at digital channels and proactive automation, and then we'll take another little topic here and we'll put that in as well. What does it look like for a system or an application to try to tackle the problem of digital channels, proactive digital channels, and AI, all in a common framework? Well, let's take a look at that as well. So here's an integrated application, and again, this is integrated into that touchpoint experience at the front end of Communications Portal, which is a framework for handling all kinds of media, including calling, texting, emailing, and so on. And it supports proactive notifications through a couple of different mechanisms. One is you might have a campaign coming from, say, a database, like, say, a marketing database, or a group of appointments that are coming up for tomorrow. You know, if you're a medical office, or let's say you're a meter reader and you're going out to read the meter for a utility. Maybe you're delivering a service, you're a cable service, and you're coming out to run cable. Whatever it might be, you have a group of people that you want to send an appointment reminder to notify them of the upcoming appointment. And that can be driven by any campaign through a text engine that has logic associated with it that can be defined graphically. And in this case, we're looking at this communications portal application, being able to drag and drop objects onto a screen to bring in a list and send that list out to a targeted group of, say, cell phone numbers in the case of text messages, or email addresses in the case of email addresses, or even phone numbers in the case of a pre-recorded voice message. So we can drive that through a fairly simple and elegant graphical workflow to pump that out to a list. Now that doesn't have to be a list. It could also be an event. So let's say we have a recall on a particular product and we need to send out a recall notice. Well, that recall notice may have been triggered by an event of somebody purchasing something or whatever it might be. Or let's say we have an issue in customer service and that issue has just changed status. We need to gather more information from the customer for that issue. Or we say need to notify them that their issue is resolved and give them the actual resolution. All of those events can also be used as triggers through the workflow to send out those notifications. But just as in the case of the appointment reminder that we saw in the healthcare scenario, now let's say we're looking at a financial transaction. Maybe there's a fraud alert for a credit card or for a bank account, and we want the person to review their recent transactions, but they have a question. So they can text back their reply, and we can pump that reply back in through the logic, and there we can conduct a conversation with the customer in an automated way. Now this same framework can interface to AI engines like IBM Watson or Microsoft Language Understanding Intelligence Service, LUIS, or any number of AI frameworks that are built in the cloud and are very, very scalable and capable of handling intelligence in the form of back and forth conversations. This same framework can build, we can interface to that same AI engine to build and go back and forth with conversations. Do I, what about my recent transactions is problematic? Or, I approve my recent transactions, or whatever I might text back. And in the event at any time that I need to talk to someone live, I can then queue the interaction as a live interaction in the contact center. Or what if I want them to click on the link in the message and go to a mobile app or a mobile website? I can do that as well. And the same framework supports an automated visual way of putting that workflow on a mobile device and allowing the person to walk through their account information or change their appointment or whatever that flow might be. And from that mobile app also, I can queue a callback or a chat or an SMS texting session with a live agent. If you look at the picture as a whole, you're looking at a holistic customer journey framework. You're looking at a framework that can handle lots of complex workflow with automated proactive outbound, with linkages to mobile apps and websites, with the ability to conduct back and forth conversations through the framework and do that in an automated, intelligence-driven way. The key is you've got to tie it into one common framework, but always provide that hook out to the contact center in the event the person needs help or assistance. So here we're looking at a couple of different systems. In the case of Touchpoint, we were looking at the agent and the agent application integrated with a system like this, a framework for text media handling and intelligence. which when combined give us a complete end-to-end experience for a complete customer journey that can span any number of different textual, digital forms of communication along with voice, all combined in the same framework. If we look at self-service, it's very tempting to say that artificial intelligence is the way to go, but we've got to take a hard look at what the self-service methods that are in play today and their prevalence versus cost. So in a similar way to when we were looking at the ways of measuring quality in interactions, let's take a look at how people are delivering self-service through both voice and digital channels. Certainly the website, FAQs, common information on products, services, and so on, is the most common way that businesses today are delivering self-service information. Almost 90%, according to Contact Babel, are using that. About 50%, about half, have some form of IVR self-service. This is more than just an automated attendant that directs the call. This is the ability to look up a customer in a personalized way in a database, bring back their information, and convey that information through the IVR out to the customer through voice. And it can be done using speech-enabled voice. We'll see that in a second. But the cost is starting to go up a little bit. When we get into the deployment of an actual mobile app or website, again, almost half are using a mobile app where they're conveying useful information through self-service out to customers. The key here is to connect things together so that the FAQs in the website can also be made available through the mobile app. And the IVR workflow, say we look up information about a customer like their account balance, can also be used through the mobile app. Again, looking at a common framework to reuse those components can reduce cost and increase the value of the interaction. We move forward, email, proactive, again, almost half. When we get into SMS, it's lower. Is it because SMS is harder? Well, in one sense, it's a little harder. We have to integrate through some kind of SMS gateway provider. In the case of Enghouse, we, for example, have a couple that we work with, Twilio and Message Media, both of which we use as gateways into networks through telcos to be able to send SMS messages out. There are some considerations here. You have to worry, for example, about blackout lists. When customers text back stop, you need to stop sending them messages. They've opted out of being a recipient for those messages. So you have to be able to handle scenarios like that. You also have to worry about things with digital marketing, like the pace of interactions. When you send out proactive notifications, you've got to be concerned with what the telco allows you to do. If you send them out too rapidly, in some cases, they will actually turn the service off for you. So there are considerations there. And so it's a little bit more complex. And so there's sort of a reduced percentage of customers doing it today. But what you need is a good partner who understands those trade-offs, who can help you with when and how to use SMS effectively. But then as we go up into a higher cost, we see speech-enabled and speech-rec-driven self-service through the IVR. And of course, eventually we see the virtual assistant or chatbot technologies, which are integrated to an AI engine. Is it the licensing of those services that drives the cost up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars? Generally, no. Generally, it's not the licensing alone. It's the tuning. It's all the setup of all the sort of natural language understanding rules, the handling of all the different phrasing of a question, the ability to carry on an interactive conversation with a customer where you can go back and forth. So again, earlier we talked about a framework that supports that interface to the AI engine, but the AI engine itself requires a semantic tree of information to be configured and tuned over time, and that can drive up that cost. Real quickly here, let's turn back to the agent. I think we've talked about a lot of factors here technologically. We've talked about from a business perspective what's important. But the agent is such a key part of delivering an excellent customer experience, especially as we digitally transform and move into these new media. So what's important is that we measure, again, that customer satisfaction. And although we encourage that in our agents, interestingly, we don't always reward what we encourage. According to that Contact Babel survey, even though higher customer feedback scores was the #1 criteria encouraged for agents, what agents were actually rewarded on were things like showing up on time and handling things in a short period of time and making sure that you made yourself available and adhered to the schedule that you agreed to. And all the way down fourth was customer feedback and CSAT. The key message here is that when we're delivering digital transformation and customer experience focus in our businesses, we need to reward the same things we encourage, the same things we prioritize as a business. So make sure those are aligned. You know, when we look at what digital transformation does for the agent, it does a lot of different things. You know, in the traditional model of voice calls, we were looking at having to staff our agents for a volume of calls that goes up and down, peaks and troughs during the day. But when we start introducing other things like self-service options, we can take away some of that call volume for those customers to those agents. You know, we're now flattening that line of staffing that we require. When we take time off calls with some of the productivity tools like customer context and CRM integration and others, we're starting to take those peaks and troughs and we're starting to move them toward the center. When we offer callbacks to customers, we call them when volumes are low. And so we're talking about flattening and then moving the calls to staggered text channels like SMS and email and other things through the day. Again, we're flattening that line. This is good for the business because it reduces cost, but it's also great for the agents. They're not constantly being bombarded with the next call or feeling like they're not getting to those calls. We're deflecting those calls to alternative forms of communication, and those agents are then handling those alternative forms of communication throughout the day in a paced, planned way. Agents also love the variety, especially as we now staff millennials, people that are about 30% of the U.S. workforce right now are millennials. And so we're definitely starting to see millennials handling more and more customer experience. And when millennials come to the table here, they have a huge amount of experience with digital channels of communication. And they like those digital channels and they're comfortable with them. And so we're going to see an increased skill set for the handling of digital channels as millennials enter and grow in the workforce. And so this flattening of media handling through the day, handled by someone who's very comfortable with text channels, is a very welcome thing for that group of agents. You know, today if we look at the problem of staffing agents and making those agents happy, the agent salaries and the costs of training and keeping those agents trained is still the vast majority of the budget of any contact center or customer experience center. And it takes a while for an agent to become competent, over 10 weeks according to the surveys. And yet we still lose a very high percentage, about 20% of agents every single year. That's across all locations and verticals. In some vertical markets, like outsourcing, that attrition rate actually exceeds 50%. So it's a staggering statistic when we think about how expensive agents can be and how hard it is to keep good agents. And amazingly, the absenteeism rate for agents is almost 10%. Almost 20 days a year, agents, frankly, just don't show up for their jobs. That's a staggering statistic when you compare it to other business functions within an organization. That's over twice the absenteeism rate of the agent's manager or supervisor. So that's an amazing stat, and so we really need to focus on agents as a key part of this equation. So how do you get big bang for the buck? Well, You remove those routine interactions and you try to make the agent life interesting by amping up their digital capabilities, by giving them some of those tools that we saw earlier to allow them to blend channels together and blend data together and look at the history and context of the customers they're helping. Give them those tools, and then of course coach, mentor, and continuously improve them. And then as we saw in the stats, make sure we're rewarding the right things. First, contact resolution, customer satisfaction. Those are the kinds of things we want to reward because those are the kinds of things we prioritize during our transformation of our business. So we're about wrapped up here. Real quickly, there's another survey that was done by a company called Nemertes, an analyst here in the U.S. They did a survey of Enghouse against some other players in the contact center space. This is a bit of a shameless plug right here at the end, but it was a very, very favorable survey. They surveyed a group of our customers that are dividing their voice and digital channels. What we see there up in the top left, about 20% are doing voice and email, 24% were doing voice, email, and chat, 20% also had SMS as part of the equation. So over about 70% of these customers were handling digital communications, and they all, after deploying these kinds of applications, like what we saw earlier on the slides, had a significant reduction in call handle time, a significant reduction in call hold time, and a significant improvement in customer satisfaction. And they actually did a comparison of the cost of the deployment of the Enghouse solutions against some of our competitors, and we were significantly cheaper, 58% lower on capital costs, 35% implementation, and 21% on an ongoing basis for operational costs. So just a little bit of a plug, but you can deploy the tools that we saw earlier in the webinar at a reasonable cost with a very, very high payback. Here are the market surveys that we were seeing during this presentation. I'll leave this up on the screen for a minute. I mean, we're gonna field your questions next, but I'll put this up on the screen so you guys can use this. We'll also send out a copy of the presentation to everyone who's attended, and you'll have a copy of the recording that you can listen to at any time as well. But these are some of the surveys. I think these surveys are very, very interesting if you want to compare yourselves to other folks in the industry that are trying to do this kind of digital transformation, that are undergoing this focus on improving their customer experience. So feel free to go and download those documents and take a look at the survey results and get back to us with your thoughts. We appreciate that. So with that, we will wrap up. And again, if you use the opportunity to text in any of your questions, or if you'd like to text in questions now, we have about 3 or 4 minutes left here on the webinar time. We'll stay on a little longer if you like. Please feel free to ask your questions now.
All right, thank you very much, John. As mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, we'll be taking questions now. So just another reminder, you can use the chat panel to put the questions in. And one of the questions here I see is, how does the SMS percentage change when you have a larger group of independent contractors? Over 80% of the workforce is an independent contractor working under the company name.
So I assume by that question that by when you say independent contractors, you mean that your agents or customer service representatives are working as independent contractors under your umbrella, and I think that that is interesting. I think that then you are talking about a little bit much more of a challenge, maybe in training or educating people to use a common framework. If you look in some of these surveys, particularly the Dimension Data and Contact Babel surveys, they go into the prevalence of e-learning tools now. So if you're using a group of people who are starting to, who you're leveraging from as independent contractors or people who don't actually work for the organization, and you're looking for ways to help them through coaching and learning, e-learning is coming on very, very strong. It used to be the case that in-person learning in a classroom was by far the #1 usage criteria for effective training. But now e-learning tools have gotten really, really good. And when you combine those e-learning tools with how to formulate effective text communications and go through samples of useful SMS text messages and emails and so on, and chats, it can be a very, very effective tool. The other thing that we mentioned earlier is using the best conversations that you've had through your customer conversations as a way of coaching agents to get better as well. You can provide those out to your contractors, and hopefully they can learn from your tools and from your examples.
All right, thanks, John. So thank you, everyone. That concludes today's webinar. Later this week, you'll be getting a link from us with the link to the recording as well as to further resources. So thanks again, John, for presenting today, and thank you all for attending. Have a great rest of your day.